What if I were to tell you that the key to sleeping better and to overcome insomnia isn't about feeling more relaxed, but in fact, it's about learning how to be okay when you are not? So today's video is actually part of a 4-part series where I break down how to overcome insomnia holistically. And we're going to deep dive into how to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because the reality is, it's not about escaping the discomfort, but learning how to meet with it and what to do in those kinds of scenarios. And if you are new to my channel, my name is Fiona. I'm a recovered chronic insomniac turned certified sleep coach. I help other people overcome insomnia holistically because I know what a horrible experience insomnia can be. And when I was personally struggling with insomnia, I used to find it very difficult to actually find the right resources that actually helped me with long-term recovery. And like I said, today's video is part 3 of a 4-part series. If you haven't watched the first and second video, I do encourage you to watch those since they do lay the foundations for you to understand the first 2 components that are so important when it comes to insomnia recovery, which are education around insomnia and what is specifically happening on the physiological and mental level when it comes to sleep. And then second, how to befriend wakefulness, which is kind of like the reverse of what is actually happening with insomnia. For today's video, though, we're going to be, again, speaking about how to deal with the insane amount of discomfort that is caused from the lack of sleep, and more so the thoughts and emotions that are attributed to that experience. I do want to start off with saying that I know how unbelievably uncomfortable insomnia is. I experienced it myself, and it is by far the worst experience that I have ever had to go through. And I've also seen and lived this through the lens of my clients. So through this video, I am not aiming to discredit your discomfort or say that this is at all easy to do. However, I do want you to feel empowered, and I want to give you the tools so that you also know when this discomfort shows up, what you can actually do about it, and how you can actually start to rewrite this dialogue so that you can take back control from what insomnia is saying and go back to really living your life and kind of like thriving in your own life despite perhaps whatever's happening with sleep in the background. So discomfort. Discomfort is actually what triggers the cycle of insomnia. So oftentimes we think that it's the lack of sleep that is causing all of this sleeplessness, but in fact, it is the discomfort associated with that lack of sleep that is actually perpetuating the cycle, right? It is the reaction to how we sleep, not how we slept in itself. It is the fear, the resistance, the frustration, and the I can't do this spiral that we continuously try and avoid and fix that is actually perpetuating this narrative. So when we avoid and fight discomfort, we're actually feeding hyperarousal, which is the state of fight or flight that is continuously reminding us that we are in a state of threat. And this is in itself is actually what keeps insomnia going. So the way out of this isn't actually to push and fight discomfort, but it is to learn how to be with it and know that the reaction and this idea and these stories that we're telling ourselves aren't always true. Knowing this about reactions is incredibly important because this brings us to the second pillar around discomfort, which is that our nervous system learns from our reactions. Our nervous system, meaning our fight or flight response system, and this state of hyperarousal is something that has been triggered by how we have reacted to the fact that we are not sleeping. So every time you are actually allowing yourself to sit through a rough night or a patch of anxiety without trying to control it, your nervous system is actually learning that you can feel discomfort and still be okay. However, the reverse is also true. If you're sitting through a bad night, you can't make sleep happen, you're feeling despair around the fact that you aren't sleeping, then your nervous system is continuously learning that this is a position of threat that it needs to protect you from. However, sleep isn't something that you can avoid or control, meaning that it's going to end in this endless loop of despair where you're continuously fixing a problem that actually has no solution. So in order to actually fix that kind of reaction and nervous system response, you need to almost like learn how to sit through discomfort and through that wave of anxiety, knowing that you are okay and that you can experience discomfort without having to change it, and know that when you do experience it, the wave of discomfort actually passes quite a lot quicker. To this, I actually want to share a little bit of an analogy that was once shared with me that has stuck with me over the years, which is that you can see emotions as the rolling waves of the ocean. So imagine that you're at the beach, you get into the water, and the waves are a little bit stronger than you intended. And you have two choices. So imagine that these emotions are, or these waves, sorry, are emotions that are simply passing through, because realistically speaking, we can't always feel happy, or we can't always feel a specific way. But if the more you fight with these waves, the more you're going to get tired and potentially like drown in them. You kind of fall into the trap of the emotions. They just become stronger and stronger. However, if you simply allow yourself to float and bob up and down, letting the emotions kind of like take you, I guess, through its journey, the more you're actually going to be okay. And you'll actually realize that you can float through this experience as opposed to actually fighting it and I guess getting deeper and deeper into them without actually being to control them. This brings us into pillar number 3, which I believe is so relevant and something that I used to also personally experience quite a bit, which is the truth that you cannot think your way out of discomfort. So if you have been lying awake in bed and hours have gone by and nothing you try and do has allowed you to fall asleep, then you also know that you have most likely been trying to reason with your thoughts. So oftentimes for me, I would almost like feel like I couldn't think about specific topics, or that in itself would keep me awake. Like I used to almost attribute my hyperarousal to the fact that I was thinking about work, or how much I had to do the next day, or how much was going on in my life. Or even the fact that I wasn't sleeping. So I would almost try to think my way out of discomfort. I would try and say, okay, I'm going to calm down my body by focusing on my breath, or I'm going to meditate to expect this specific outcome. And this is where the recovery from insomnia truly is this buildup of emotional resilience, because it is not about trying to change that experience again. It is knowing that those racing thoughts can also be there, and yes, that they are uncomfortable, but that you are also okay through them. So this is where, again, through video number 2, we can talk about this befriending wakefulness, because unfortunately, you cannot think your way into sleeping. However, you can experience the discomfort. You can know that it can be there, and you can almost like reutilize that attention to do something else. So specifically with insomnia, if you are experiencing discomfort and you cannot force yourself to sleep, instead of just lying there in the discomfort, in the dialogue that you are having with your own mind, then you can get up and out of bed. You can journal down your thoughts. You can almost like process those emotions, allow those thoughts to be there. Almost give yourself 5 minutes to simply sit with whatever is happening in your mind. Just watch whatever's happening, and you'll actually start to realize that that dialogue isn't in fact true and isn't one that you need to engage with. And then you can redirect your attention into doing something differently entirely. And what this is actually doing is, again, teaching your nervous system that that discomfort isn't something that you need to react to in a poor way, and that it isn't an experience that you need to change. And this ties into pillar number 4, which is that true freedom from insomnia, and taking away insomnia's power also comes from no longer needing this comfort to feel safe. It is knowing that you can sit through the storm and still feel grounded. And even if you aren't sleeping, and knowing that you're going to be okay, that's actually when your body feels safe enough to release. This is where true surrender happens, when you can allow yourself to be okay through the discomfort and know that this isn't a fight that is worth having. You need to know that you're okay even when things are not easy. And this applies to not just insomnia recovery, but so many other aspects of life that sometimes feel like are controllable, but aren't in fact controllable at all. It's knowing that you cannot have control over specific outcomes, but regardless of what that outcome is going to be, that you're going to be okay no matter what. Because you have the tools, you have the emotional resilience, you have the know-how to know that through discomfort, you are still okay. That discomfort isn't something that needs to be feared or even avoided. Now that you know the importance of experiencing this discomfort, I also want to acknowledge that I know it's not easy, and I know that discomfort shows up in so many different ways. I know it shows up in the beginning of the day when you have had a horrible night of sleep. It shows up specifically when you have a full and long day ahead of you. You probably are a high performing perfectionist. You have a lot of things on your plate, a lot of responsibilities. You need to show up for yourself and also other people. So it shows up quite a lot there because there's a huge amount of dread of like, okay, what am I actually going to do? How am I going to actually show up? And I know this experience for myself, like I used to feel quite panicky in the morning, very emotionally irritated. I'd always try and like push away that feeling. I'd try my best to still like plow through, go to the gym, have a coffee, know that I'd be okay, push away the discomfort. And that was always quite an uncomfortable feeling. I know it also shows up throughout the day when you feel tired, when you almost like sometimes wish that you had slept and you can't. It almost brings you to the brink of tears. I know that it really shows up at the end of the day when you're approaching bedtime. It is quite daunting because it is scary that that might also be your reality all over again. And I also know that it shows up quite a lot in the middle of the night when you in fact cannot sleep. And all of these experiences of discomfort can of course be experienced and also lived through in so many different ways. In the beginning of the day, I also want to ask you like why you have specific expectations as to how you'd like to show up. I think oftentimes the discomfort and how we associate to the fact that we are feeling uncomfortable is because of a specific narrative that we have set for ourselves. We tend to be quite perfectionist people. We are quite high achieving, and anything below that seems like it's below par or just not really acceptable, right? So experiencing that discomfort truly comes from allowing yourself to also be that maybe suboptimal version of yourself for a little bit. It also just comes from knowing that even if you only have 80% to give, that is still 100% on that given day, and that is also okay. And knowing that the only expectations that you are setting yourself around performance are mostly inflicted on yourself or like by yourself. Also throughout the day, there's so many different like tools that you can use. I personally used to implement something called scheduled worry time. I used to sometimes feel like during the day, like my emotions would get the best out of me. So I would schedule time, like physically put it in my calendar, and time where I would allow myself to just truly experience all of the discomfort. And that really meant that I was just going to sit there with my notebook and write down every single thought and emotion that came up. That could be thoughts around what happens if I don't sleep, or what if this keeps happening, or what if I'm actually broken, or why is this still like happening to me? Whatever that thought would be, I would allow it to just be there. You're not trying to change that thought. And in fact, I realized that the more I scheduled this worry time in my calendar, the less I actually was worrying about things throughout the day, because I was allowing myself that time to truly experience that discomfort without actually having to run away from it. Before going to bed, that was always like a difficult time. I also, through this whole idea around befriending wakefulness, I tried to dismantle these elaborate sleep habits or sleep efforts that I had incorporated for myself. And that in a way is also learning to be okay with discomfort, because we're trying our best to avoid the potential of not sleeping. Hence, we are trying to avoid the feeling of discomfort. And that means that we're also incorporating all of these different elements, all of these different habits in order for sleep to actually happen, right? So dismantling them and actually taking them away is a way of actually you experiencing that discomfort and knowing that even if you do not sleep and even if you do not have these elaborate routines, that you're still going to be okay. In the middle of the night, also very uncomfortable for me. I would experience quite a lot of anxiety. And I know that, for example, in cbt-i, they have this principle like around sleep hygiene that you shouldn't be spending more than 15 minutes in bed without being able to sleep. And in fact, yes, you cannot make sleep happen. And in my approach, I don't believe that you need to get out of bed for this, but I used to get out of bed because I felt that would allow me to process the emotions that I was feeling in that moment. And I'd always go to bed with a journal by my bedside table. And oftentimes if I was by myself, I would like turn on the light and I would truly just write down everything I was feeling. And in a way, It would allow me to not have that dialogue with my mind, knowing that I didn't have to engage with all of the thoughts of dread, and know that yes, I was awake, but that I would be okay in the end. And I also want to say that this isn't a quick and immediate fix. This isn't something that you are just going to maybe experience one day and then never have ever again. Even a year into my insomnia recovery, there were still nights where my mind would sometimes think, what if this happens? And that in itself would trigger hyperarousal. However, the difference now is that I have the tools and the knowledge to know that I am okay. So it is something that does take practice. It does take a little bit of effort, but truly learning how to sit with this discomfort and what that sitting with that discomfort looks like for you is so unbelievably empowering, and is something that you're actually going to take into all other elements or all other areas of life without actually realizing it. And it's going to empower you to have so much more emotional control and resilience over every single difficult situation that you encounter. Anyway, I hope you liked this video. That's enough rambling for me today. I would also encourage you to watch the 4th video to this series. It is all about learning self-kindness and compassion, which ties in so well with this feeling of discomfort, because it's also knowing that this journey is not about being perfect. It's just about experiencing it as it needs to show up without actually having to run away or change it. Perfectionism and control tends to be the reason why we end up in this situation to begin with. And in fact, the way out of it is to learn the opposite and to learn that we don't need to control every situation and we don't need to be perfect throughout this journey in order for us to get better. If you are ready to kickstart your journey, I have also linked a 5 days to better sleep email series below that is completely free and is packed with so much knowledge around insomnia recovery. Alternatively, you can also sign up to my newsletter. I also send out weekly newsletters around insomnia recovery, both success stories, information around sleep, maybe even success stories from a few of my clients. And if there are any questions or anything that you're ever struggling with, feel free to leave a comment below and I'll definitely get back to you with an extensive answer. Anyway, bye for now.